Everyone. Oh, that was so sad. Good afternoon, everyone. As Diana said, my name is Glenn Ogilvie, and I'm delighted to be here, supported by this esteemed group of people you see coming out to help us have this conversation about capacity building. But before we get there, I do want to recognize that it is 3:07 p.m. Let's everybody clap it up for 3:07 p.m. I also want to recognize that we've been here for a day full of capacity building. I'm going to tell you a quick little thought of mine as it relates to capacity building versus mission, and then I'm going to engage us in a bit of an activity before we get started. So first, the thought. Capacity building is like the vegetables when you were in middle school. The mission work is actually the dessert. More of us appreciate the dessert than we do the vegetables. So for you all to be here since 8 o'clock this morning eating vegetables, you should give yourselves another round of applause for capacity building. So quick activity, it's going to get us up. So if you have a little room in front of you, I'm going to ask us to stand. It's this thing called stand and cheer. Everyone can start standing, and then I'll just warn you, we're going to sit and stand a couple of times. So if you didn't get your squats in this morning, you'll get them now. Let's stretch our arms out. Let's get ready to rock and roll. Everybody feeling good? This is a good-looking group. You have enough room to stand and sit and stand again if you need to? All right. You guys are looking really good. I'm getting nervous. All right, I can have everyone sit, and as I ask you these questions, I'm going to ask the people who would have a positive response to these questions to stand and cheer. So this is your opportunity, if you have a positive response to the question, to stand and clap and yell and do all of that breathing, yoga, empty your lungs stuff. All right, stand and cheer if you are related to a small organization, we'll refer to it as, with a budget from 0 to 250,000. Stand and cheer. All right. I like that. All right, stand and cheer if you are related to we'll call it a medium-sized organization with a budget of 250,000 to $1 million. Stand and cheer. All right. Be proud, be proud. Stand and cheer if you are related to a large organization with a budget over $1 million. Anybody here with a budget over $1 million, stand and cheer? Awesome. This is a pretty evenly split group here. This is really good. Stand and cheer if you have heard something today that you know that you will execute. Something you've learned thus far that you know you will execute. Wonderful. Wonderful. All right. So thank you for indulging me in that exercise. Actually, you guys did all the exercise. I was just up here spouting questions. So we're going to get into the vegetables. And those vegetables are capacity building. And without capacity building, we do know that our organizations cannot grow. We cannot thrive and accomplish the outcomes that we're looking for. I'm delighted to have our esteemed panels here. We won't go into their long bios, but I will tell you they are all here in the program. So if you'll join me on pages 7 through 12, 7, 8, 9, and 12, you'll see the bio for Diane Wallace Booker. Diane, please raise your hand. She's here. Give her a round of applause. I'm going to keep this energy up. Rob Malone is here. Let's give Rob a big round. Octavia Caldwell on the end there. And then Gable Barmer is here with us today. So in the short time that we have with you, with a lot of enthusiasm, we are going to cover all aspects of capacity building. We're each going to share some points with the thought of what capacity building means to us individually through our lenses. We've got the public-private partnership lens. We have the establishment of an organization that ultimately merged with another for the benefit of the community. We have a new organization, the challenges, the successes, and what that looks like. And then we also have an evolution of capacity building, how it's grown and evolved here in Prince George's County. So we're going to hear from all of them. But before we go forward, I'm looking for one volunteer to share with me the definition of capacity building. Who wants to define that for us? There's no wrong answer. Your definition of capacity building. Nobody wants to stand anymore? What's happening? Stand and cheer if you want to talk about your definition of capacity building. Go for it. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Danielle Middlebrooks. I I am the Executive Director of Community Youth Advance, and to me, capacity building is internal work. It's working on staff, it's working on internal controls, finances, like you said, the vegetables, the things that are not necessarily programmatic, but they're very important to running a nonprofit.
I love that. Perfect. Thank you. The vegetables, the things that make you healthy. All right, so we're going to start our conversation with Diane Wallace-Booker. Diane's going to take us for about 3 minutes, maybe 4, on what capacity building means to her through the lens of establishing a new organization, the ups and downs associated with that.
Great, thank you. It's glad to be here with you all. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about sort of our story. I run a national organization that now has programs in 7 states and Washington, D.C. We have about 47 staff, 400 volunteers. We've served over 10,000 kids and about a $4 million budget. We started 21 years ago in 1998, and it was just 2 of us. It was myself, and I'm an attorney by training, and my pastor, Wintley Phipps. Many of you know him as a bass baritone gospel singer. And neither one of us knew anything about running a nonprofit organization. We came together around the passion of intervening in the lives of children who had parents incarcerated. In 1998, we were not talking about children with parents incarcerated. They were a forgotten population. They had been significantly impacted by mass incarceration. And in our country, we were really heading toward the height of mass incarceration. So I was really intrigued by this. I had not thought about what was happening to our young people in communities of poverty with no access to, very little access to high quality education and the family instability around incarceration. So I volunteered to help him. I got totally hooked in this space and I ended up leaving the practice of law to help him build this organization. What I didn't anticipate was that I was also going to have to build a finance department, an HR department, learn how to manage money. I went to law school so I wouldn't have to actually add and subtract, right? Now here I am trying to manage this money. We got a $100,000 grant from Department of Labor like really early on before we even had staff. I would literally have to write checks out for payroll and then figure out how much I was going to deduct from the taxes for that and give these people checks for their payroll. And I quickly learned you have to build systems. You have to build processes where the executive director doesn't have to be involved in everything that happens. Payroll every 2 weeks should not be an event, right? It should just happen. You shouldn't even be thinking about it as it goes. But it was what consumed you, and it takes you away, right, from the passion and the pieces you really want to do in the work. And the other thing that happened for us early on was that because we were so passionate, like all of you are, we come to this out of this real desire. My desire was really around justice and around seeing positive environments for young people, wanting to create those moments for young people where they could thrive. That was my passion. What I quickly understood, though, was that I made a lot of decisions born out of my passion, not great ones. I didn't make disciplined decisions. I didn't make operational ones. I made ones that maybe great programmatic ones, right? And maybe ones that really did impact kids' lives. But on the other side of it, the sustainability of the organization was being compromised because I didn't have the right people in the right seats. I didn't terminate people quickly enough when I realized they couldn't do the job I hired them to do. I didn't put enough money aside to make sure that we were saving and we could have some rainy day funds, right? I learned through the School of Hard Knocks, right, over the course of a number of years. You guys have so many resources today. When I started, we barely even had Google. I couldn't just type on, what is capacity building and how do I find my 990s and, what's good governance look like and how do I do board minutes where you could really actually look back on them and know what happened at a board meeting, right? Not just, did we talk about this or not? And so the resources today that you guys that I've heard you all talk about, what I was given for that 21 years ago, I really, really, really want to push you to engage in these, because we could kind of talk about all the different capacity things you need. I want to encourage you as executive directors, many of you are founders and executive directors, to really understand that capacity for me, when you ask me what is it, it's a discipline. It's the discipline to say no to a project when we don't have enough staff that can really manage it. It's a discipline to say no to funding when they want you to do 10 things, but they want to give you the money for 5 of those things. All right? It's an education in terms of understanding, even with our funders, how we negotiate with them about the funding and what we really can accomplish. So I had to develop a discipline within the organization to really build a business. It's my last point, and I'm turning it over.
Thank you, Diane.
And that point is just one last point.
Please go.
I had to remind myself and my staff that a nonprofit is a tax status. It's not a business strategy, right? 501c3 is merely an IRS tax code. It's not our strategy for how we operate. We're not trying to not have any money at the end of the year. We're really trying, okay, thank you. But it ends up what happens often, but the idea is that we really do want to make more money than we bring in a year. We want to think critically about how that money goes to meet our mission and how we build an operational infrastructure that supports that mission. And the resources you've heard today, the organizations that are here can absolutely help you do that. And I just say commit and discipline your time to take the time to do that, to build that in. And I promise you'll have much more time to focus on your mission once you get this foundational stuff done. It's critical. I'm not sure who's going next.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. All right, I will keep this quick. So I think what I'm supposed to talk about is just a quick glance at our roadmap. And I'm sitting here in a couple of seats. One is the founder of an organization called Community Youth Advance, and our executive director is sitting right here in the front row, Danielle Middlebrooks. You notice she messed up her last name because she got married in October, so she's getting used to Middlebrooks. So, sorry, really quickly, now that I'm choking, I did not set out to start a nonprofit organization. The group was called Mentoring to Manhood back in 2005. I, along with a couple other guys who pretty much lived in the same neighborhood, wanted to make a difference for particularly young black boys, because when you turned on the news, it would piss you off, make you cry, or drive whatever emotion that came with what was happening. And so we decided we wanted to make a difference and just jumped in, right? So that's the dessert. That's not capacity. So, and in listening to Diane, it just triggered something I realized maybe a couple months ago, because the organization is going through some capacity building. As a consultant asked a question, I realized we didn't do it right. And one of the things that we did wrong was we wanted to address issues with youth in challenging situations. But what we created was an organization to some degree, and hopefully my funder won't get mad at me and Danielle won't criticize me for saying this, but to be honest, we created an organization of convenience. We serve kids who can find us. We operate where we can get space for free. And in some sense, we're not exactly where we're supposed to be if we were true to the original mission of the organization. Take that for what it is, but that's something I think we've recently thought about. Long story short, for I guess why I'm here is I've never been asked to sit on a panel to talk about our merger, but I think that's the main reason why I'm here today. I'll just ask the question. So we were 4 guys, a couple of years into this. We're asking young kids all the time, how's it going? How's it going?
Okay.
How are your grades?
They're all right.
All right. Okay, tell me what all right means.
C's,
D's. Okay. Years of work. Every time we asked the question, we got the same thing. So what do you think we did when we heard that year after year? Someone, real loudly, what did we do? Huh? And you're right. So just like some of you have said, every time you're working with a population, you recognize more and more needs. We didn't plan to be a tutoring organization, but we weren't seeing what we wanted to see. And so we knew kids knew what to do, but weren't doing it. So what do? You work with them. So we started a tutoring program. Long story short, we found an organization that did tutoring. We raised money to engage that organization to tutor our kids. We did it for 7 years, and after that period of time, we talked for maybe a year and a half about merging. I'll tell you, ours worked, just kind of, skipping time here. Ours worked because we had 2 founders with similar passions, visions, missions, which was, we're all about kids. I wasn't trying to make money or a living off of this. Neither was she. We both had careers,
and we wanted to make something special for young folks. And in fact, if you are a founder, it's important for you to know this is not your organization. It is a community asset. So when we built this organization, it wasn't to build something that was somebody's, it was to build something for the community that made an impact. So I'll pause there because you're probably going to have some questions, but that's our short story. The merger has worked. We had our funders, a number of them come to our board meeting, talk to our board members about pros and cons, what's worked, what's not worked. So we were very well prepared, and I can just say we've had no drama in our process, and it has worked out extremely well. We're now a $1.5 million budget organization, which is amazing for us because this is, and now we're doing capacity building. I'll stop there.
Awesome. Thank you, Rob. We'll go to Octavia next.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I am coming from a different perspective than both Rob and Diane, in that I am a consultant that has been working with nonprofit organizations as a consultant for 15 years. However, I have been involved with nonprofit organizations all of my adult life. As a former employee in Prince George's County government, I actually developed the administrative procedure for how nonprofit organizations worked and did training so that the county government would be a better partner with the community. So I have sat on all sides of the table, both as a consultant, as a nonprofit. My husband and I founded a nonprofit, Global Mandate, that is a missions ministry. And so I am experiencing a lot of the things that the nonprofit organizations do on a daily basis. Let me ask this, 2 questions. One, I'm going to use his stand up and shout. If you are a nonprofit based in Prince George's County, would you stand up and shout?
All right.
Okay. Now, of those, keep standing. Don't sit down. That's going to be the difference, okay?
Feel the burn.
If you are a nonprofit based in Prince George's, still stand. Now, if any of you all have received capacity building, remain standing. If you have not, have a seat. Okay. Of those that are standing, give a shout out if your capacity building achieved what it was intended to achieve. Okay, thank you. You can have a seat now. Appreciate it. The reason I ask those questions is because my observation is that there has not been enough emphasis in Prince George's County in particular, but not just in Prince George's County, on what the real purpose of capacity building is, even when it's funded and given to an organization. For instance, if capacity building is needed in the area of the organizational planning, they get to do a strategic plan. The purpose is to improve the planning skill of the organization, not just to produce a document. And so often what ends up happening is the document gets produced and everybody thinks it's successful, and the planning skill of the organization has not improved. So one of the things that we're looking at doing in Prince George's County in particular is providing technical assistance and long-term, because capacity building is not a one-shot deal. It's not something, it's not an event. It's an ongoing, continuous process. And technical assistance, somebody to get down there with you and provide the hands-on that you need to help. So I'm telling you to stand by. There is a difference in the kind of capacity building that will be going forward in Prince George's County.
Thank you, Octavia. We're going to give a round of applause. We're going to pass it to Gable. And Gable's going to share with us, and actually maybe even carrying on Octavia's points, for how intentional capacity building is now in Prince George's County, and I think we're sitting in it, right? But also about the public-private partnerships, as well as his sort of view of capacity building through that lens.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
So my title is Public-Private Partnership in a Changing Political Environment without glasses. I think I'm close. So when I think about public-private partnerships and politics, the first thing that comes to mind for me is public policy. So to follow all of this, you have to really be entrenched in the public policy space or know someone who is, because it's an ever-changing and evolving environment. And when one administration changes to another, figure out what those priorities are and try to align yourself with those as best possible. One thing that most platforms, political environments, they'll say 4 major things. It's going to be housing, public safety, and some of you may have heard about the incident in California today at one of the schools, transportation, and education. Those are 4 buckets that most politicians nationally can run on at the state level and actually at the local level. And we know healthcare, there are a lot of other issues, but those 4 buckets you can kind of latch yourself to. And you need to figure out what these public policy, what the direction is going to be, so that you can figure out how to align yourself so that you can become successful. So you heard a lot about public-private partnerships. So to bring it to a local level, we have the Kerwin Commission here in the state of Maryland, where all the education funding, which is the education funding formula. So if you're in education space, you need to be very familiar with that. Latch yourself to it and understand it, because things that come out of that will be public policy that will come to the local level so that you can align yourself to that as it's rolled out. And some of you heard from Rosie earlier from the United Way, and they are helping that process here on a large scale level in the county. Public policy is very important because if you're talking to someone who's in a political leadership position, you have to speak their language. If you get on somebody's calendar, you go sit with them, and you're talking about all these great things that you're doing, and it isn't linked to anything that has been set as public policy in this jurisdiction in the county, you're really wasting your time to some degree. It's great that you're passionate. I'm just being real. It's great that you're passionate. It's great that you're doing these things, but if you're not in one of those buckets that align with these budget items that they put out every year, what are you doing there talking to them about a tutoring program? And that's great, but you have to figure out how to align that tutoring program with public safety. If there's a public safety issue in the county, take that tutoring program and say, well, guess what? Most incidents happen for kids between the hours of what? 3 and 7. Okay, guess what? Our kids are not involved in that because they're where? Involved with tutoring. As opposed to just going to someone in public office saying, hey, let me tell you about my tutoring program. Link it to something that makes sense to them. Link it to that budget. Understand what these budget cycles are like. Because these public policy initiatives are very serious. So here in the county, to be more specific about the public-private partnership, there's something going on with the schools, school construction. Anybody hear about the P3 model, where they're going to take X number of construction companies? It's going to be $8 billion over X number of years. They're going to build X number of new schools in the county. Then from that, they're going to have maintenance projects. Guess what? The county's not on the hook for that, because the public-private partnerships is there. The private industry is putting up the money. If they succeed, the government reimburses them. If they don't, the government loses nothing. That's the new model. Everything's based on outcomes. These capacity building programs that Ross mentioned that people are going through, you have to hit your outcomes to remain relevant. No one's giving money away any longer. There's no new money. You're competing with others. So develop these public-private partnerships, link them to what you're doing, put them in the public space, and figure out how to align yourself with these strategies, because guess what? Most leadership are in position for how many years? At least 4. And in this county, maybe 8. So it may behoove you to align yourself with some of those so that as these things begin to roll out, you'll at least have a general understanding of what they are, how they work, and how you can link to that to help your organization move forward.
Awesome. Great point. I'm going to get you to hold that thought and ask you to turn it into a question in just a moment. So I know we have burning questions. This was a lot of information. I'm going to round us out and just get us to the Q&A. The first thing I'm going to say is a few things that we already know, and the first is people give to people. Behind the titles and behind the organizations, we're just people, right? People give to people, and they tend to give to people who have good reputations. And a reputation is hard to build and easy to ruin. So people give to people. They give to folks with good reputations. We heard from Octavia sort of where we've been, where we're going. We heard from Diane on some of the passion that doesn't really make the mark, but some of the back office stuff that needs to be done to sustain. Rob's organization merging with another for the benefit of the community and sort of stumbling, but also finding their way to become what I define today as a large organization, 1.5 million. And Gable sharing about the partnership with government and how essential it is. I'm going to say no money, no mission. The passion is great, but without the resources, we can't serve and we can't achieve the outcomes. I'm going to touch on just 5 quick areas that I think we all should be heavily immersed in from a revenue standpoint, and then I'm going to open for questions. So I think our most sophisticated organizations are receiving revenue and funding from corporations. They're receiving that from foundations as well, from individuals. They have an earned income model where they're actually selling goods and services to subsidize costs for those who can't afford it or for their programmatic expenses. And they're also receiving dollars from government, and that's where Gable finished us off. So with that, we're going to open up for questions. I think we did a good job talking fast. We have about 15 minutes, a little less to go. So where is our first question? Don't get shy now. We were standing and cheering just a few moments ago. We got one right here. Please introduce yourself as you ask your question. Feel free to direct it to all or someone on the panel.
Thank you. Kalila Denny again with the Denny House. We have been awarded a number of capacity building grants in the county. So thank you for your support. But the question is, we have, most times we haven't received the amount that you need to truly implement your programs. So you're receiving a lesser amount, which is definitely needed and useful. How do you move forward? What do you suggest we do as it relates to continuing in that effort of doing the work that you're supposed to do with the amount of funding you've received, and then going back to talk about the impact based on the level that you received versus the level you needed? Does that make sense?
Anybody want to take that?
I want to first say that this work is not easy. So if anyone can give you a silver bullet answer up here, I would love to have them as my consultant as well. I have a couple things highlighted on my page that I thought were worth sharing that I found that are helpful. So your first asked the question, I thought you got to raise more money. And for me, there's a couple of things that I found really helpful. One, Glenn already just said, which is you've got to match and align what it is you do with the interest and passion of the people who have resources. It's no different than if I'm selling refrigerators or banking accounts or whatever I'm selling. I have to align it with the need and interest of people who I need to purchase that or to contribute. I found some things to be helpful to do that. One is research and then meet with them and make that connection. Two is, I always try to go, if it's a first time meeting, with a second person. In my informal research, I'm better as a salesperson if there's two of us than if there's one. I think there's something about having two people there so the first person has a deeper level of commitment to what they said they would do in the meeting, but that's just my own informal research. And then the third, I'll stop just so I'm not talking a lot because we agreed not to talk a lot. The third thing I'll say is lots of meetings, lots of tours, invite people to come see your work, lots of lunches, I do a lot of lunches, and a lot of follow-up. So whoever I met here today, whether I think they're at the top of my list or the bottom of my list, I send emails by tomorrow. Even if I meet them on Friday, I send the email on Saturday. So I think as you keep doing that, just like in sales, you're going to have some hits and some wins. You're going to have some misses, but it's all about the activity. So that's what I would share.
Awesome. Next question.
Oh, I just wanted to add for
please,
her.
one more point.
Just if I understand your question correctly, you're saying that you are getting funded for something, but you may not have enough funding to do that complete project. And how do you ensure that you can complete it with the outcomes, or how?
So the ask for funding matches the need, right? And we may not be able to, if the award is less, we may not be able to have the same outcomes that we originally expressed. Mm-hmm. So now we're coming for more funding, more capacity building, same vein, and we have been able to raise funds in other avenues to still support the work and get the work done. Yeah. So I guess the question is, so if I'm being transparent, is how do we get more funding in that area if we're doing the work, from those same veins? Yeah. If that makes sense.
It does, yeah. I know that in a couple of instances where we have made a request for $1 million, for example, we got funded for maybe $600,000, we did have to go back and renegotiate with the funder about what we could achieve for this amount of money. And we identified with the funder what was most important to them and us, and we reduced the outcomes on that before we got into the project, because we were clear that we're not going to be able to do all 5 of these that we proposed. So that's one option.
That's exactly what I needed to hear. Thank
you. Yeah, that's one option to take.
I'd like to. The other thing that you could also do that I've heard funders say that they appreciate seeing is especially when you're going back to the same funder, is talk about the outcomes from the prior funding level, but also talk about what additional funders would do. How will that impact? What impacts will come from that? Are you going to be able to serve more people? Are you going to expand the program? I mean, not just because we didn't finish what we wanted to do the last time, but what are we going to be able to do additionally that we weren't able to do? Yeah, so focusing on that too.
Can I add one other point here? Understanding your project and scoping it out well is really important when you put your proposal in, because sometimes we do say we're going to do the world, and really we can't. And so we need to make sure that when we first put in the proposal, we're clear. But if they fund you less, from all the funders you heard here today and from our own experience, they really do want to be in a dialogue. They want to understand, can you really do this or not? And if not, what do we need? The other times I've asked funders too, if their funding is less, could they give us recommendations to other funders that they know of that could help fund the rest of this? And sometimes then they can help you build a collaboration to get that whole project funded.
Awesome. Next question.
Hi, my name is Adrienne Augustus, and I am the founder of a new organization called A Beautiful Mind Foundation. We launched our website on September 3rd. We had our inaugural fundraiser on October 6th, and in 2 months we raised $10,000. Now, I am the... Thank you.
Congratulations.
Diane and Rob, you will understand this. I am the founder, the board president, the web designer, the social media manager, and when I work from home, I am the janitor. $10,000 does not make a salary. So at what point and how did you get to a position of being able to pay yourselves?
So for me, I think 1 year there were some folks. So first, I had a really good board. I had folks. I found people on LinkedIn who were not my friends, and they joined the board. And they joined the board because I had a passion, not because they knew me. So what was good was it wasn't all my friends. one of the people on the board said you should get paid because the organization should get used to paying someone. So 1 year I got paid, but technically I didn't need to get paid. I had a full-time job. So my goal was never really to make money out of this. My goal was to provide a service to the community. I think a lot of people don't know that. I think they think I got paid, but I didn't get paid. And I think for me, I'm proud that I didn't do that, because in order to hire Danielle, we needed enough cash on the balance sheet to give her at least 2 years without worrying about money. And the folks, we engaged before Danielle. So we had a plan, a strategy. So money, I guess, from that perspective wasn't an issue for us. Money for us was an issue as it related to programs. Everyone in here has stuff we need done or we'd like to do, and we don't have the money. I run full-time an organization that has a $31 million budget, and I can tell you right now, I don't have the money I need to do what I need to do. So it's not a matter of your size. It is that there's always needs. And so if you run the government for Prince George's County and you have a budget hearing with all of us asking for money, they don't have enough money. And so what I've tried to do, I'll close on this, is my job as a founder for this organization was to also try to help bring in resources into Prince George's County that weren't already here. Because I'm not adding value if I'm just taking resources from your nonprofit because I won that application and now it's here. There's no additional value for the county, right? So I spent time trying to find ways to bring dollars into the county. So most of our funding now is from MSDE for some of the academic work that we do at Community Youth Advance.
Awesome.
Yeah, it does. It takes a little bit of time, and I know that I was the first paid employee, and I believe strongly that founders and executive directors, if they're going to put in full-time work, we have to pay them. And I left a career in law to do this. Our founder didn't take a pay in the beginning because he continued to work full-time. He was a singer and a pastor, so he was working, so he didn't need the money. I needed the money. And, I worked very hard. I mean, in the beginning, I got paid $25,000, so I was still practicing law on the side. But I needed a little bit of something to get it over. So I think that as founders, though, there is always this little bit of stigma about founders taking funding from the organization in the beginning. And so it's something you have to balance. I don't think it's fair, but it is something that's out there, and that, founders are going to have to, it's not like we go into this to make money, but we also have to make a living. We have families, and we have to care for our own selves, and we don't want to stretch ourselves so thin that we can't do this really important work. So absolutely, it's going to require more fundraising. And some of the resources they talked about today, the LDC, the state government funding, the city council people, go for those. You've got to get a little bit more funding under your belt before I think you could take some salary, but maybe not obviously the full salary that you would take. But that's a balancing act between when do you really start taking salary, but you've got to build a little bit of capacity. And his point about hiring somebody first, and then maybe bringing yourself on. But it's going to be a grind in terms of just going out and raising more money and prioritizing one of your key capacity needs in the beginning.
All right, so we have time for one more question, and then I'm going to give our panelists a final thought and share some parting words. Please, sir.
Good evening. My name, again, is Julius Ware. I'm with 100 Black Men of Prince George's County. I'm not really sure how to ask this, but I'm just going to put it out there. It's wonderful that we're talking about capacity, and I'm glad that this is the first annual. I know when I walk in here, I would like to be able to contact everybody in this book and everybody in this room. That would help me immensely with building my capacity. I spoke to the lady out front, and she said you're going to address that. I look forward to that, because that would certainly help me increase the capacity of my Rolodex. And I can then write those, send those emails out on a Saturday instead of having to meet everybody in here. The second question is, I believe we need to increase our capacity to do more work, to address the needs of the children. We need to hire somebody. instead of using the money that we have to pay people. So, well, I'm just putting it out there. Are there any grants? We need to increase that capacity. We need help with that.
I can share two quick things. One is, what was your name again that asked the last question? Adrian's on a much better path than I started on. In our first year, we had a budget of like nothing. But when you're working with young people, all you need is volunteers. So if I had a choice between $10,000 from Starlet or 10 volunteers, I'd actually take 10 volunteers because the impact with youth always happens one-on-one. So I'd say that. So some of you who might be guests, I would say build a really good volunteer base. That's how we started. We didn't have money. We put in our own money. We made it happen. The second thing I was going to share, I forgot, so I'm going to pass it on.
And let me just add to that, the easiest and quickest way to engage individual donors is to transform volunteers into such. So the volunteers who are giving of their time and energy, oftentimes after a while are willing to give also of their resources. So I keep that in mind as well as we run our volunteer engagement campaigns. All right.
Volunteers are great
Please.
capacity builders. I mean, we could not do our work around the country without a cohort of volunteers. So building that up at the beginning is key, and they might end up being your fundraisers, they may end up being your employees, they're going to end up, staying volunteers, but filling some critical roles.
We have a wonderful volunteer catalog, but we need a capacity building grant.
Oh, I know what I was going to say. So one thing this may not be right on your mark, but okay, so maybe in year 2 or 3, I was writing grants. I was not a grant writer, and I won nothing. I found a grant writer who was very reasonable, who was able to package our story, and we started to get grants after that. Now that's, again, not a silver bullet. I would just say so we're 15 years into this, and I think just like the training for the marathon I'm going to run on Saturday, nonprofit stuff is a marathon. If you think you're going to blow up Kimberly, am I right? If you think this is going to blow up in a year or two, it doesn't work like that. It just does not work like that unless you have amazing relationships, because relationships trump everything. But otherwise, it's a steady slog, and it's small bend by small wind till you hit a tidal wave. Then you plateau, and then you got to figure out, what do I do to get beyond the plateau? So I would just encourage you to just stick in there, keep engaging folks, help them see the products you create, which if it's you, it's young folks, young males doing amazing things, presenting well, because when other people see that, they get excited and they want to support it. So it's a steady process. And if you're not quite sure, I can tell you as a person who had passion but hated the vegetables, if you don't like paperwork, you don't like property tax returns, you don't like IRS returns, you don't like the good standing certificates from the state of Maryland, if you don't know what I'm talking about, ask somebody before you start this nonprofit. If you don't want to follow the Maryland Charity Registry and have to submit 10 years of what you didn't submit before, don't do it. Just talk to somebody, get engaged, volunteer somewhere, volunteer with another small nonprofit who's also not making money, neither one of y'all making money, partner up, make it happen, or come volunteer with a community youth advance. But I think there's plenty of options besides starting another nonprofit, because there's a lot of paperwork that goes with that, and it drains your passion.
So we're going to take that as Rob's final thought. In our final 10 seconds, I want to hear a final word from Gable. Just a word is fine. Octavia and Diane. Parting word. Singular.
Party word, partnerships.
All right.
Still thinking about mine. I know, right?
Go for it.
Disciplined operations, but don't lose your passion. You just cannot do this work without it, and we need people in this space who love children, who love working with homeless, who love, you know, lifting people up, and you have to have the passion, so just please find a way to balance that. Get some good volunteers maybe who'll come in and who love, some people love operations. Find those people. Balance your organization, and whatever you do, hold on to that passion for as long as you can.
What I'll add to what everyone has said is I'd like to offer a working definition for what capacity building is from my perspective as a consultant. And that is anything that improves the operational, the financial, the organizational, and the programmatic maturity of the organization so that they can be there serving the people they were created to serve and achieving their mission is capacity building. And so strategically thinking about how do you fund capacity building in your organization, and that is as you go through, and I hope you do go through a budgeting process, make sure you include that as a line item, and you may have to include some, fund your capacity building out of some of your fundraising that generates funds that are not designated, if that makes sense at all.
All right, you all, I want to add my thanks to our county executive and to this woman, Diana, and Sheila, and everyone who helped organize this first annual. Let's stand and cheer as we wait for our final panel. Come on, we still got some legs under us. Stand and cheer. All right. Thank you, Diana.